Welcome to your Get That Nugget for GCSE English Literature. Today we're going to be concentrating on giving you a framework in order to structure your paragraphs to answer the Shakespeare essay question. Specifically today we'll be focusing on the character of Romeo from Romeo and Juliet. This session is to complement your lessons with your teachers and not to replace them in any way. So, Romeo is one of the main characters in the play, obviously, and he is someone who changes quite dramatically throughout the play. As the play opens, we see Romeo is desperately unhappy, desperately sad, because he is in love with a woman called Rosaline, who does not return his affections. He has been rejected by Rosaline and as such is moping around. When we first meet Romeo, he seems incredibly confused about love, because as he understands it, love should be a positive thing. Love should be a thing that heals you and makes you feel better and gives you hope in your life, whereas the rejection by Rosaline suggests that love is a painful thing and a difficult thing. So our first response, AO1, in terms of Romeo's presentation, is that Romeo is confused and unhappy. When we look at how Shakespeare achieves this, we're going to look at the comparison between feather and lead and brightness and smoke. So feather and bright are two positive things. This is how Romeo believes love should be. Lead is incredibly heavy, as if he is weighed down by something, and smoke is choking. They are opposites, which mean they are oxymorons. However, once you've established that they're oxymorons and therefore contrasting or conflicting, you can then start to unpick the individual words. So, feather, light, flight, this idea of freedom, this idea of positivity. Brightness, linking to the sun, linking to life, which is what Romeo thinks love should be. Contrasting that with lead, which is heavy, so he is weighed down. And then smoke, which can be blinding and choking. So already we can see that he has this confusion over love, something that he thinks should be positive, but which is incredibly negative for him. In terms of assessment objective 3, this shows him as atypical, so not normal, in terms of an Elizabethan man. He is presented as someone who is in love with love, who does not like violence or conflict, is not bothered by his own pride, and this sets him aside from all of the other men in the play. He then goes to the Capulet ball, and at the Capulet ball he meets Juliet, falls in love with Juliet, and even though he knows the danger, even though he knows it's not a sensible thing to do, he decides to go and visit her in the Capulet orchard. When she questions him about how he managed to get there, his response is, "With love's light wings did I overperch these walls." What this shows us about Romeo is that he thinks love makes anything possible, and that he thinks love is some sort of superpower. So our first response in terms of what this shows us about Romeo is that he believes in the power of love, and he is willing to do anything for love. The way that Shakespeare achieves this is through the metaphor with love's light wings. So that quotation itself implies that Love can make you fly. That love can overcome anything, even walls. And we go back to this idea of lightness, this idea that love shouldn't weigh you down. Again, AO3, he is going against Elizabethan society. He shouldn't be anywhere near Juliet. So love is giving him courage. Again, showing him as atypical. He is willing to go against Elizabethan society. He is willing to reject what should happen in order to get what he wants, which is love. Last quotation I want to look at in terms of Romeo is "I am Fortune's fool." Following his marriage to Juliet, we know that Tybalt challenges him to a fight, which he rejects. His friend, however, steps in. At this point, Romeo has done the right thing. He has stepped away from the violence. He has stepped away from the possible consequences of committing any acts of violence. But following Tybalt's killing of Mercutio, Romeo is so overwhelmed by emotion that he kills Tybalt. He then refers to himself as Fortune's fool. So the first thing we're going to say is that Romeo recognises his mistake, but he is not taking any responsibility. And the reason we can say that is because when he refers to himself as Fortune's fool, that metaphor suggests that he is there to entertain fortune or fate. The reason this shows that is because in Elizabethan days, a fool would have been another word for a clown or an entertainer. Fortune is essentially being personified here, and Elizabethans believed that your destiny or your fate was written in the stars, and inescapable. This would have supported Elizabeth's claim to the throne. So the idea that she was destined to be queen was written in the stars, and therefore if we accept that all of our fates are written in the stars, then we have to accept her as queen. Okay, so there are 3 quotations. If we're then going to use them to answer a question, we're going to structure our paragraphs using AO1, AO2 and AO3. So if we start with this one, Romeo is presented as in love and confused by love. When Shakespeare uses the oxymorons feather of lead, bright smoke, he shows that Romeo has both positive and negative views. Lead is heavy metal that is toxic and weighs you down. This is contrasted by Romeo's ideal of love, which is that it is light like a feather and allows you to fly. So there's our AO1, AO2. Then we link this back to AO3. Shakespeare is presenting Romeo as an atypical Elizabethan man due to his feelings about love. Okay, so you've got AO1, AO2, AO3, and if you structure all of your paragraphs like that, you'll be hitting every single assessment objective, which will give you the best chance of getting the best grade. What I want you to leave with is these 3 quotations, and then use those to answer the question, how does Shakespeare present Romeo? You can look at other quotations if you want and try to annotate them in the same way, or you can just use these 3.